Just one more second.
The lady that works up at the should be business licenses as well, or is that just city landscape architect?
All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Krista Van Hove. I am a campus planner at Stanford and president of the Northern California ASLA chapter. I also have Carrie Gowith from Keller Mitchell helping me co-host today, and Laura Luer, our executive director, providing technical support. On behalf of the chapter, thank you for joining Lunch with Leaders, Industry Icons with Mia Lehrer. Our chapter has hosted this lecture series since the summer of 2020. So if you missed any of those, you can find the recordings on our chapter website or our YouTube channel. Don't forget to register for our lunch guest in October. We will be hearing from Michael Boland, and to follow in November and December, we are hosting April Phillips and David Walker. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we start. If you're comfortable, please turn on your cameras. It'd be great to see everyone. We're a little bit of a less formal group since we're all mostly landscape architects and haven't been able to get together in person as much lately. And please utilize the chat function to submit any questions that you have during the presentation, and then we'll get to those at the end of today. Now I would like to welcome our special guest, Mia Lehrer, ASLA Fellow and founder of Studio MLA. With offices in Los Angeles and San Francisco, the robust and multidisciplinary team works to address urban issues through environmental systems planning and resilience strategies. Mia is internationally recognized for progressive landscape design, advocacy for sustainable and people-friendly public places, and catalyzing work for a climate-appropriate future. Educated at Tufts University and the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, she lectures and teaches around the world. Among her recent accomplishments, she is the newest commissioner of the all-female Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. She has served on Obama's Fine Arts Commission and was honored the ASLA Lagasse Medal. Her firm also was recently announced as the Smithsonian's Cooper Hewitt Award for Landscape Architecture. Big round of applause for you there. Mia, you're not only a brilliant designer, but you're passionate for the community, and efforts to advocate for people through landscape architecture do not go unnoticed. I'm always amazed how present you are and how eager you are to help students and young professionals find their way. And we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. When Krista calls, she's always so enthusiastic about the program that it's wonderful to sort of be a part of it. And I see that there are some friends in the audience, and hopefully I'll be sharing something new because they've seen some of the material before. But thank you for the lunch and learn. We were bemoaning before that unfortunately we're not sitting down and also having some food. We're eager to share sort of where some of our work and sort of our approach to landscape architecture. And I'm not being able to progress. So this is, am I doing it or are you doing it? Okay, so with some of the design principles that we deploy are thinking holistically across disciplines and working, we rely on experts in many fields, and we basically are very much inspired by the level of work that we do together and the sparking of energy that happens out of the collaborations. We design with environmental justice in mind, work with nature, stop conquering nature, go from consumption to conservation, move towards small, decentralized, overlapping systems, evolve from single-purpose to multi-purpose infrastructures, change people's perception of beauty, think beyond our lifetimes, and we know that there is urgency now. I'm not being able to control my own desk. Can you? Somehow I'm not being able to control my own slides. So, as we, cities continue to draw the majority of the world's population, and climate continues to change, and people are planning and thinking about cities differently, we as landscape architects, are in a position to really work in that confluence of nature and architecture. And we see the design of the creation of public spaces as a way to advocate for communities. That's what we do. We look for opportunities to tell the stories that are layered within places, stories of people, neighborhoods, hope and conflict, water, air ecology, and empowerment. In each project, we look for solutions that create community trust, health, well-being, and pride. What's happening? Am I going to be able to do this by myself? By doing this or by doing this? Okay. Over the decades, among the things that we realized was that leadership leads to vision. So when you're talking about your city council, your governor, all that sort of, there's vision that comes across our paths, and that policy leads to funding. So funding leads to planning, and design empowers and materializes. So that was a realization in my first decade of work, that the value we brought was basically through design to help people feel empowered and understand what funding was necessary to deploy solutions in the environment. This is our team, and of 45 professionals. That happened to be Women's Day, but it's always been surprising in the last in the last year when people ask, well, what is the sort of the approach that the firm has to equity and inclusion and multiculturalism in general? And of course, that's been our ethos all along, and one that we sort of have really deep roots in communities, and we understand the value. We are in our space, which is a warehouse next to the LA River. We created an amphitheatrical space for us to be able to do events, and both professional events, events for where, in this particular case, we were doing the LA County Sustainability Plan, and we were doing a workshop, and this is me taking part of the workshop on that particular day. Building resilience, really addressing green urbanism, community, and of course, many of you understand sort of some of these icons and these terms that we are all sort of deploying. LA, which is a large metropolitan area that includes 88 cities. Like the rest of America, California is uninformed, innovative, ahistorical, hedonistic, acquisitive, and energetic, only no more so. That's Wallace Stegner. So this is sort of the LA basin. And by, of course, but 75% of the population by 2050 will be living in cities across the world, and we're getting ready for that. LA is one of 88 cities in the LA basin, so it's really important to know. And the state population is at about 40 million. So we could actually, based on the economy of California and the population, we could actually be a representative at the climate in Europe during some of the major COP26 meetings. So Los Angeles takes, is 503 square miles, not that different from Sao Paulo, Mexico City, and New York City in a way, but it's more dispersed, of course. And so we have 4 million people, where Sao Paulo has the 12.3 million. We were invited by the Getty Museum to participate in a conference, and it was a conference trying to put together material associated with how Los Angeles came to be in terms of its DNA. And when one of the things that became clear was that when Rainer Banham was out here and he talked about the beaches and the mountains and the flatlands, that he had missed the sky. Somehow that was a discovery for me that he didn't talk about the sky at all. And it is, 360 days a year of beautiful blue skies. So what I uncovered was that he, when he was here, the pollution was so outrageous that there was not, the sky was not to be seen on many of the days that he was around. So, and of course, I don't have to tell you, most of you, know that we're just in this great state where Mickey Mouse was born, and then Silicon Beach and Google and YouTube and Snapchat, just to name a few. So we're in this incredibly powerful and creative place. And Los Angeles really is a city of villages. It's not one big sort of uniform city. It just has very different characteristics, and it's really interesting. It's also both culturally diverse, but also physically quite diverse. We've had these ciclavias, where people go from one end of the city for the first time. They go on Wilshire, and they can go for 20 miles and see about 20 communities along the way that they've never met before. And we do, of course, have nature. And this is P22, our friend. This photo took months to get. By a wonderful photographer, but he's this charismatic figure that really has become the emblem of our sense of climate, our sort of acknowledgement in the Southern California. Climate change is here, and we have to become engaged in a meaningful way. So this is the Overdrive exhibit at the Getty in 2000 and in 12, 13. And we did mapping that, that they were really very drawn to, because it really helped understand the layers and the systems of the metropolitan area, including, of course, anything from rails and trails and roads and all highways, and really sort of understanding the systems thinking that we were trained in in the 1970s. And what that led to, of course, is green infrastructure and the kinds of projects, in our case, the kinds of projects we're involved with, which at the time in 2013, we had touched about 4,000 or 5,000 acres of regional parkland through all the work that we had been doing. And, we could at that point also, we had metrics to figure out how much air we had filtered and how much runoff we had been able to manage. And that was very appealing to this crowd as part of the research that they were doing. And then, of course, it has helped us in many ways as we share with people, being that we're not that involved in a sort of an academic setting. But we do lectures and we're involved in many sort of different environmental nonprofits like Heal the Bay, like Tree People, like the Watershed Council. And, we are able to share with them, what are, for example, as part of the connectivity analysis, the potential intervention areas that would allow for a better future for P22 and his family and friends. So watersheds, of course, this is how you find out and get really serious in California, in Southern California, when you get your highway signs telling you that this is serious, you gotta help save water. And of course, we've had several droughts that have, been changing every few years. Since 2017, we've had 2 more cycles of this. And fire. We've had across the state, of course, actually across the Pacific coast. We've had a tremendous issue with fires. And no sooner did I think I was sort of getting a handle on all the issues associated with water, where water comes from, how the different types of water, how we can actually really understand and be able to communicate to our clients and engage meaningful in sort of policy making, that I became a member of the Department of Water and Power Commission, the largest utility in the country. It's been really interesting, and I'm really proud of the agency and what it's trying to do and what they've accomplished. And they still have to go a distance, but their attitude towards a new technology is admirable. Their process of sort of hiring and really sort of understanding the future of the region is also very interesting and important. And it also is they're making great strides. They have tremendous redundancies in the systems. And I've learned more about cybersecurity than I would have ever wanted to know. So, of course, we continue to, basically get and borrow and exchange water from the north to the south. We are the food basket, so to speak, for a lot of the country, and we use a lot of water. The aqueduct, 373 miles, we still are spending, good between 15 and 19% of electricity of the state is actually moving water around. And this is what happened on the LA River as the city started growing and industry started and rail started coming in this direction. And the Army Corps discovered concrete and started really encasing the river in concrete. And sort of 70 years later, everybody realizes, holy cow, we gained some and we lost some along the way. And of course, the movies really mark people's perception of Los Angeles. And yet there's been a tremendous effort. And in some places, the water just didn't stick, the concrete didn't stick because the water table was so high. So in the end, nature wins sometimes. And of course, Obama signed some important legislation to recognize the LA River as a river and not just a channel, which was terrific. And people have been slowly been able to use the river. And of course, the herons and the egrets and others are still here. The mayor has put forward an executive directive to really make sure that the sources of LA water locally would be sort of at least up to 70% by 2035, and that we would recycle 100% of wastewater for beneficial reuse by then also. So there's a lot of effort in becoming more water independent and more frugal and less wasteful. Here is the 52 miles of the LA River as it goes through, and then also the tributaries. What's been really interesting for us is that at first the stem of the river is the only river that was the way people understood the sort of DNA of the river was through this infrastructural moment down the middle of the basin. But at some point, the realization that these tributaries contributed a tremendous amount to each of these communities, and that people identified that with them based on even their scale, became a really interesting opportunity. And so this is the plan, the master plan we did in finished 2007 with Civitas and with Wenck Associates and Tetra Tech. And, it's interesting to see how much of the project has and hasn't sort of advanced, of course. But what we did do is create value by virtue of the fact that people understood that it was there and that water quality was a factor. And as we started doing interventions throughout the city, that the water in the river was cleaner, and that neighborhoods were becoming, there was tremendous initiatives in terms of greening of these neighborhoods and enhancing the identity, and then more development, of course. So I think this has sort of been a project that was published over time. These were some of the typologies along the edges of the river that we sort of advanced and that have become part of the planning and code for the city. Really trying to create an identity with paseos and bridges and gateways. And the first time in 2007 that we were all using photomontages. So it took a while to get to sycamores and others to make them look like Southern California, which was a lot of fun. But also we were able to work through the issues of the Army Corps' concerns about access to the river. And they're concerned that if there was a big flood event, everybody would flow down the river and, sort of end up with tremendous liabilities. But so we developed strategies for actually harnessing the edges and really opening up the area. So it wasn't sort of fenced off, and instead it was integrated into the city. And the same thing happened wherever a tributary met the river. More recently at the Taylor Yard parcel, there's a 100-acre parcel that has, we've studied and worked on with a big grant from the Coastal Conservancy. I like showing this because this is the polluted areas from the old train sort of facility that was there. It's intense and deep. So the opportunities to actually reimagine this place are associated with the same issues that you deal with in the Bay Area. It's the list of the liabilities, but then also the amenities that people really dream to have here. And, it was obvious nature, people, really want to celebrate nature. They want recreational opportunities, and they want to, relate to the river and so we did a few alternatives. One had an island, since there were always islands in the river before it was encased in concrete. And so this is scheme one. What? Okay. So this is this is the scheme with the island, getting closer and sort of really trying to understand its connection to the city through bridges and also connection to other parks. Really starting to understand what the opportunities were as we knitted the project together with other public interventions. And this particular one actually dealt with the soft edge, which was allowed for the river to lap up into the space in high rain events, and so the water would become more present. So this is, again, this is sort of a further sort of development of some of the work that we did in 2007, done in 2020, sort of looking what the edges could be. And then came an Assembly Bill 466 that called for a plan to reduce flood risk while meeting community needs and focus on disadvantaged communities. So it was really important to understand that this actually dealt with mostly the tributaries, that there were about almost 1 million people that had been incredibly disadvantaged by where industry was located, where a lot of the freeway infrastructure was located, and that the opportunity and the obligation was now to try to figure out how to address asthma in these communities. And the plan actually was able to provide a tremendous amount of access to parks and open space, and also enhanced spaces and air quality at a tremendous rate. This is just one example. The Aliso Canyon wash and debris just made, just the idea that people could go to school and then, go a block or two and be able to cross the river safely, as opposed to going through the streets. This particular Pacoima wash also connected residential areas and a park and a community center. And so the plan provided, basically 10 square miles of permeable cover and 260,000 trees with carbon sequestration, and 8 square miles of habitat and 9 square miles of connections. And what this has actually been used for is to advocate for funding at a regional level in the area in the northern part of the river. So with that, I just want to remind everybody, leadership leads to vision, policy leads to funding, funding leads to planning, and design empowers and materializes. Just to get quicker, because I think I'm eating up into our time. This is the Exposition Park, and it's right in the center of the county, in the metropolitan area. So it's an incredible transect of the city, where we're working on not only the Lucas Museum, but we worked also on the soccer stadium and then at the Natural History Museum. I think for us, what was meaningful about the Natural History Museum project, it was an urban ecological laboratory. It was the first time that, based on sort of work that I had done with Stephen Handel, this became really evident for us. This was 5 acres of parking that became the front door instead of the back door of the museum. And here you are, sort of 2 years out as it was installed. The relationship not only of the new entrance to the museum and the bridge, but also all the amenity, all the gardens that were created was incredibly well received. The students from USC come and actually for the first time are able to do a lot of lab work here. And one of the things that came out of it was the BioBlitz, a city nature challenge that was developed by the education department. And it started originally with 2 cities, San Francisco and LA, and now 100 cities around the world and regions actually participate in the City Nature Challenge. There's a couple books, and it's really been incredible, the level of energy and enthusiasm in terms of understanding the world around you. And this is sort of what it feels and looks like. And then finally, what I share with you today is Hollywood Park. If somebody would have told me that I was going to be involved in 3 or 4 stadiums, I would have said, come on, really? But I've been working with Wilson Meany on Hollywood Park, a racetrack that was being repositioned as a sort of infill in the middle of Inglewood. And oops, out of nowhere, we went into a lockdown and there was a new addition to the program. And it turned out to be a sort of a football stadium. So there it is. It's called, what happened was that after the original plan had been approved, and the specific plan was approved for 3,500 units of housing and a tremendous both commercial and other entertainment development. The stadium came in with a theater, and the rest. We did work around water and water conservation that had some of the first projects dealing with stormwater capture at the level that we did on the site, and used the notion of the California Transect as part of the project to actually help us go beyond the list of the trees that we were allowed to plant in terms of drought tolerant sort of local plants. So we expanded the list to not only the California Transect, but also the Mediterranean biome. And here are some of the sort of deployment of some of these strategies associated with the massing of the buildings. It's a very large building. It's 80,000 seats, and it's also 80 feet in the ground. So this lake takes reclaimed water and and also drainage water, and we re-filter it and then use it for irrigation. I think it's actually it's becoming the heart of Inglewood, a small city with one of the 88 cities in this metropolitan area, where there was little parkland. If anything, there was a cemetery that people really like to take part in, and the actual relationship with the architects and the engineers, HKS and others, PACE. Was incredibly sort of fruitful, successful, and the actual wind, there's a wonderful airflow through the site, and a series of gardens that were created. That as we were working on the site, we started using nomenclature like canyons, for example. So this experience of walking to your seat by going through a canyon has become there's only been like 5 events, but it's appreciated. We also were able at one point to explain to the client after we were done that it was really a botanical garden. So we actually incorporated sort of signage that was sort of they were very excited about, and they're really kind of proud of what has been created here. And so we have basically gardens from all of the Mediterranean biome countries. And I think with that, I just want to finish up what I said was that, in the 1950s, I didn't grow up here, but this is what the air looked like. And this is already a group of women wanting for fresh air. This is what it looked like in basically 1960, and this is what it looks like today. And I'm proud to say that even though I didn't necessarily partake in a lot of the activity that happened around, reduced car emissions as the city has grown, and that the state has been a leader worldwide in terms of environmental quality and environmental legislation. So LA has many sustainability plans, all of which are tracking from 2021 through 2050. I guess this was the day that I was, basically made and not sort of accepted and sworn in to the LA Department of Water and Power. And again, I think the LA 100, which is one of the DWP's main responsibilities that I walked into, was, it's really addressing carbon and climate leadership, and environmental justice and preparedness and resiliency. So with that, I just want to say that all together, I think that we're in a great place as a profession to lead, to participate, and to sort of contribute to our communities and the places that we live in. We owe it to the next generation, and I appreciate the invitation. And I know that not only does Stanford, basically operate by example in the work that they do on the campus, but they have so many programs and so many young people graduating, and also so many other professors doing interesting research. So thank you very much for the invitation, and this is what I wanted to share. Can you hear? No.
Yeah. So I thought I would lead the question and answer with my own question first, and then open it up to the audience. Mm-hmm. But first, I just want to say thank you for sharing your projects. It's so clear from them, your love for LA, for California, and just the Western region. And also, it's amazing how the projects you share have so many layers to them, from the environmental side to the people side to the design side of things. And you mentioned, that it starts with leadership. Leadership leads to funding, and funding leads to policy, or policy leads to funding, and funding leads to the opportunity to do projects. And I was wondering, now that at this level of success that you have now, I can imagine a lot of people reaching out to you. But before you got to this, before you had this level of success, how did you advocate for landscape architecture, how did you work upstream more? It seems like you work upstream so much, which is amazing. For you don't see that a lot for designers. So I was just wondering, how did you get yourself involved?
Yeah, so I started out by working with a group that was doing tree planting in schools. And I had, noticed that the elementary school that my children were going to was barren. And I found, and basically covered in asphalt. And I thought, I'm going to go talk to the principal. And the principal was this amazing lady, a powerhouse, who had gone to USC School of Education. And Dr. Dautrive became my champion. And together we, planted a lot of trees, actually, and also, a productive garden, and then raised money for, it was a time when the school district was sort of suffering from funding scarcity. And so the children weren't going on field trips. So we created a program so that a nonprofit to benefit the school, actually. So parents gave $200 a year. And then by the time you had 400 families and $200, you had enough money to do 5 field trips and to have, trees planted, and every year you did more, and it worked out. And then as a result of that, I got involved with a nonprofit called Tree People, that is a very sort of established nonprofit in Los Angeles now. But there were just a lot of young parents, I guess I would say, at the time. Another woman that I got to befriend created an organization that's also very well established now, is called Heal the Bay. And she was involved in water quality issues, and she helped people understand that all these tributaries, but especially the channels like the LA River, were carrying tremendous amount of pollutants down into the ocean, where kids were going to go to the beach. And so this discovery, layer by layer, of all this younger people, and that was happening, it was the 1980s. And so it just, one thing led to another, schools, and then the river with a poet. Not only was there Dorothy Green, who created Heal the Bay, but then the poet who was from Berkeley, who just became infatuated, Lewis McAdams, with the river. And he didn't know what it meant to be. He thought there were possibilities as a poet, because he saw, basically life in the river in terms of migration, and, and some bird life and some other life in the river. And then started learning more, and I actually got a grant, and we did studios associated with the river, and took him to Harvard, to the GSD, and his eyes started popping like, oh my God, yes, there's possibilities here, but people don't understand, right? So, so he was around another 35 years. He just passed away, but so it's just.
Let me see if there are other questions from.
I have a question, if I can just talk. My name is Katrina. Hi, Mia.
Hi.
Thanks for your time today. I've long admired your work and your design intent and ethos, which I think is really visible in all of your projects. And my question revolves sort of around that. I'm wondering if you have any tips or advice to offer on how to advocate for a project's design ideals in situations where you're working with a lot of agencies, opinions, groups that are kind of pushing forward, more or less like how do you stick to your guns in situations where there's value engineering
Yeah,
or something like that.
right. Yes, thank you for the question. You don't always get what you want, that's for sure. But I can speak to my recent experience in a couple of projects. You know, you want to one of the things is I always talk about defensive design. So design the dream and more, but be prepared for it to dial back and be okay with it. Like, for example, in our case, we will design a really complicated pattern of paving, knowing that there will probably be some value engineering and that you want to be okay with the next level. Do you understand what I mean? Like, if you have a really intricate pattern and it's really important to have the waves show through and the colors and the textures. And then if you had 6 and you end up with 3, in the end, it's probably okay. So that's one thing. I mean, in my wildest dreams, and I guess it took where I'm at today, but when one of the things on a complicated project like we were on the stadium was that we developed a budget, and along the way, over a 5-year period that you're in construction or end of designing construction, things surface that you didn't expect. And just having been clear that there was a sort of a budget sort of up sort of as a how would you say, a little bit of slough that was clear, it wasn't hidden. Just when we went in and worked with the engineers and the architects, it was clear that this project was complicated, it was fast paced, and therefore you need to keep 5% in there for something that could come up. Being sort of creative at times with one of the things, in order to meet an 80-foot elevation difference, the initial sort of strategy, it would be from an engineer, we're going to do a wall and then you could plant in front of it. And so we would say, well, actually, it'd be better to do 3 walls. It'd probably be less, investment. And that way it becomes more, that I think the plant material will do better and it'll be a better space for people, which, I think, of course, in our world, I think, like at the Natural History Museum project, initially people were worried about, even in a project like that, about using decomposed granite as like the main surface. And part of the reason was because they get a lot of students and they have to bring like materials so that the students could work. So we just said, look, let's just create a series of spaces where you could do that, which are made out of, pavers, and do DG everywhere. And the worst thing that happens, you come back in 5 years if it doesn't work, right? If it becomes too much maintenance. And, developing the right sort of understanding the best way to do the installation so that it meets the needs. In that particular case, it had to meet a fire truck. So imagine the LA County Fire Department having to say yes to a DG, decomposed granite, drive aisle at a museum, but they did. and they just said, okay, well, we'll try it. And then of course they came and drove it 2 or 3 times. And it actually, just because of the section that we had developed, and we still wanted permeability, and we wanted the kids to feel when they're coming from the inner city in droves, in buses, that they feel the softness. It worked out. It's still there as DG, but you have to be ingenious, I guess. And in the end, sometimes I hope that gives you some ideas. You just have to push it. Like I said in the talk, like a year and a half ago, when people started asking us, what are we doing for equity and inclusion, and I was like jogged in a way, because we work with communities deeply. And of course, I've missed the ability to go to certain communities, because we're not doing that kind of, outreach for our projects right now. It's, they're not in person, and then there's crazy Zoom Zoom meetings, and then most of the people a lot of the people we work with aren't comfortable on Zoom. But hopefully that'll all sort of calm down.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So there's a question from the audience from Deborah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Oh, you're talking about talking about my thing on Pasadena channel. Has anybody ever used the Bare Ass Run on the Pasadena channel? Long time ago, we used to go up the thing. Pasadena Freeway would send all the rain down to the channel.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to crawl up it and go all the way to the top. So you heard the freeway, then you just have to drop your drawers, because you couldn't do it on cardboard. You couldn't do it on wax paper. It just didn't work any other way. But you picked up all the debris as you went, and it just shot you out into the channel.
Oh my God,
really,
that sounds so dangerous.
I know, but it's what we did when I was a kid. And I was just wondering, did any of you ever do that?
Well, first of all, I grew up in the tropics, and so I wasn't living here, but I don't think so. I mean, that sounds
crazy.
God bless you. You're here.
Well, there was a whole community that did this. And when you got to the top, it was all beautifully painted with, welcome to Bare Ass Run, bust your buns on Bare Ass Run. And then you would just put your little a score. They had chalk up there, and you just score that you were there, and you would do it. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people doing this.
Oh my God!
Never heard of a
well,
death.
I will ask Tim Brick, who's runs the Arroyo Seco Foundation.
Well, it was just a cultural thing that existed way, way back then.
That's amazing. Amazing. That's really fun.
But anyway, thank you so much for your work. I've been following you for a number of years. Great job. Thank you for doing these wonderful things.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question, and this is coming from Anne Marie. So go ahead, Anne Marie.
Mia, thank you so much. I was intrigued by your design principle of designing for small, decentralized, and overlapping systems.
Mm-hmm.
And the projects you've shared today are so ginormous that they would seem to really lend themselves towards centralized solutions. So I was wondering how you dealt with that, those competing interests.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it depends what scale you're, look, if, as I said, I never thought I would be doing this scale of work. But if you go there and you start looking at the different areas of the site, for example, you have the park that's associated with the lake. Then you have a series of gardens that are sort of representative of the biomes that are a few acres. And then you have a series of other sort of moments in the collections, but also where there's benches and seating. So essentially, it's like a new district in a city, which is decentralized in the largest sense of the word, meaning that is, a new set of activities that exist there. For example, the theater there had the first the high school graduation from Inglewood this year. So that's one thing, but you also have to think about how to decentralize it sort of at a regional scale, whether it's 2 or 3 miles square, the number of trees you have, how you use water. So that the lake, in terms of decentralization, the lake, which we created, so the MS4 permit, which is a new permit in the state of California, if you keep water on the site, you actually don't pay for the large piping connection to the general system. It costs you more upfront to create a lake, clearly, and organize that whole construct. But long term, you gain a lot. In other words, had you connected to the pipe system, would have cost you more upfront. Wait, it costs you more over time. So they're charging you more to connect into a pipe than to keep water on site. So we chose to keep water on site and have that sort of expense in order to be able to contribute to a decentralization strategy. And for that, you have to have a willing client, right? Somebody's going to actually invest to keep a lake going. We have a lot of seagulls coming to visit us. We have to have, we have to manage a lot of things, and the water is used for the irrigation. And we also keep the stormwater from about 150 acres on the site coming into the lake and then getting recycled through also a smaller sort of filtration plant. So that's, otherwise we could have had it in a pipe system going, 10 miles. And so, but that's actually going back to legislation and regulations and laws. That's something that was created by the state saying, let's advocate for people to keep their own water and manage their own water and not always connect to the system. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And great questions for everyone. And thank you, Mia, for reminding us of these issues that California is facing and
yes,
and putting this all into a presentation. It seems easy to just watch it and digest it because, some of the things we've heard of, but it takes a lot of work and effort to be able to document it. So we're really grateful that we have these things, these statistics available now, and know somebody that is passionate and can speak more to it. One question last thought I want to end on, with advocacy by design kind of being your mantra,
mm-hmm.
how can we go about, whether we're in Southern California, Northern California, other parts of the country or the world, how can we use like our local context and kind of tap into new ways for advocacy?
Well, thank you for asking that. I should have talked about that. Well, I would say that that our society, the ASLA, is now actually working with the Landscape Architecture Foundation and the International Federation of Landscape Architects in a sort of cohesive way to try to sort of advocate at an international level for what we can bring to the table and how we need to think about our future. I mean, it is not like, should we be involved? We need to be involved. And there's, I think it certainly, one of my classmates, Martha Schwartz, has been very involved so LAF and ASLA and IFLA, there's a tremendous amount of leadership that led to an organized front, and that's trying to sort of really advocate at an international level and in Europe, and, COP26 and many other goals that we can influence. And sometimes it's just about signing a letter, and sometimes it's about sort of absorbing. So what I would say is at the conference this year at ASLA, that would be a great, trying to find the right hope. I'm sure there's going to be some presentations on how we can start advocating, and there's European landscape architects that have been organizing around, climate change and issues, and they're making headway to be taken seriously, ideally by the United Nations at some point, right? And the World Bank and other big organizations that we can influence. So I'd be curious. I'm curious too. I'm hoping that there are some of the people doing research in your universities. I know that I had the opportunity to put in touch Caltech with Jack Dangerman at one point. I thought, why not? I'm done work at Caltech. I know Tom Prince from JPL. They had never met. They didn't realize they were a few miles apart. And maybe that's the woman factor, right? Like, what do you mean Jack Dangerman is a few miles? Yeah, he's in Redlands. And so at some point they got together and they're now doing some research together. So just put people together. Or I would say that I venture to think that there's a lot at the universities, where Berkeley or, others, of course, that there's a lot going on associated with these larger issues that we're all facing, and that we're just not, somehow, even with the internet, not as aware of what everybody's doing. And, maybe SLA could have like a little research arm that just starts putting everything together for all of us. It's hard, I get tired. I mean, it's like, I have these meetings with from other people like that are working hard through LAF and SLA. And it's hard to keep it all, together, but there is something there. And I think we're in the right place. Professionally, we are in a place to make a difference.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for that inspiration.
Yes.
And very tangible too, something I think we can all go out and do today.
Yes.
So thank you so much for living by your mission and sharing this hour with us today. We're so grateful to have you.
Thank you. And look at the back of the Hollywood sign. Because everybody thinks the Hollywood sign is this mega, three-dimensional structure. But that's how things were built in Los Angeles at one point. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you for
Bye.
joining.
Bye.
What's on there?